Chapter 25. All human life can be found in an airport. David Williams. There is a cop station in these airports, and I jumped the gun before they did. I asked a security guard, and he directed me. The desk was empty, but a female copper, who he'd called on his walkie-talkie, came out to see me. She seemed to be laughing to him about something in Thai. Fucking great. Oh well, I was going to try this anyway. I've never experienced anything like this in a cop shop. There was a copper station at a little desk beside the door as I entered, and the woman directed me to him. He was older and probably had authority over all the others. A plain-clothed woman came to stand next to him. In Oz, that would be so a man wasn't interviewing a woman alone, in case it was sexual crimes and she felt uncomfortable with the male. This wasn't that. The whole station of coppers came out and sat on chairs and desk corners to listen to what I had to say. I was the star of the station. They either knew all about my hunted status and were participating, or they were just bored. I started on my whole saga at the Ekamai Hotel, detailing how I was followed by the grommets. Then Thai Bikie showed up, the windowless van, the scared receptionist, my escape, and the biggest crime of all, stealing a fare from the taxi driver. The copper, he was probably a Sarge, said that the area I was in was a very safe one. He was trying to convince me that I hadn't been followed. Also, after establishing that I was on my own with no man, eye roll, young males would follow me. I was starting to sound frustrated and I looked like hell, so the plainclothes woman suggested that I have a sleep in the back of the station. I fully declined that. In my country, we don't pursue people who run from taxis or don't pay their hotel bill. I countered with, I'd paid my hotel bill. He then asked if I'd like someone to accompany me in the airport. I declined again, saying I felt really safe in Thai airports, giving them a compliment which I hoped helped. I reiterated that I was worried about being arrested when I presented my passport, so came here to explain myself. Apparently that had never been the plan. There was not a lot else they could do for me. I was sure they knew I was being tracked. I still had no proof that they were to be trusted. I bid them goodbye and thanked them very much and said that I'd go and get some rest. They kind of treated me like I was mentally unstable. I guess I was by now. I didn't see anyone else sus, even when I went outside to smoke in the original spot. That night, I noticed so many homeless people slept in the airport. They had all their worldly goods and obviously looked like they were living rough. No linen outfits and roly-poly oversized luggage for them. It was pretty nice of the airport security to let them do this. I had no problem taking up a bench among them. There were heaps of workers buzzing around, thankfully. I only snoozed, not slept. The overhead lights burn a hole in you anyway. The next morning passed uneventfully. I got food and wandered around. It was very hard to eat, but I knew I had to force myself and keep hydrated. I bought a little bottle of water from a cafe with a brand on it I'd never seen before. With all my water bottle buying, that is a necessity in Thailand. There were fountains to fill them at that dispensed filtered water. The time for my Vietnam flight eventually came. I'd taken to fully checking my luggage before I went through security to ensure no one had planted something on me while I slept. Luckily, it didn't take much. Those lockable roly-polies did have that benefit, but you couldn't travel on a motorcycle. Once in the departure area, I found myself a sushi cafe and even managed to get some down. I checked my email for my visa and found that it hadn't been processed. I rang a number from the bottom of one of the confirmation emails. A lovely Vietnamese male answered my call and attempted to help me. Sorry, ma'am, your visa hasn't been processed in time for your flight. You'll have to reschedule. Damn. I cursed my fear at not using my phone. I could have checked earlier than this and rescheduled the flight. I now had to find the exit. That was way harder than I anticipated. I didn't realize that this was not possible without a whole procedure. I went to an information desk and told them my situation. The young woman said that an airport representative would be coming to escort me. I didn't understand why. She explained that I'd officially left the country and would have to be checked back in. I sat despondently on the ground nearby and waited. In the scheme of things, this wasn't that big of an inconvenience. I dealt with worse. Another young woman, this time from Air Asia, came out to escort me. As we walked to an exit near the x-ray machines and after getting me to sign some paperwork, she asked me if I was travelling alone. I replied that I was. Wow, she voiced slowly, not in an admirable way, but in a, I can't believe someone like you is running around unsupervised. Or maybe she knew who I was and therefore knew the dangers I was under. I doubt it though. There's sleeping rooms in here. Perhaps you could go use one of those. She was lovely and concerned. She even said I could get a discount on another flight to Vietnam. When I got back to the AirAsia counter, another woman fixed this up for me. Luckily, I still had cash to afford it. I took the advice and headed straight for the sleeping rooms. They were exy, but they were ideal for a hunted woman in Thailand. The whole security detail of the airport was protecting me in here, unlike a hotel in the outside world. I'm glad I have a love of airports, not Australian ones. Asia really know how to do a comfortable airport. The rooms were really nice, huge bathroom, fragrant toiletries, and glass bottled water. I lay down for my 8 hours of rest. I couldn't sleep. I had so many things to process, so many questions to ask the coin. There were all sorts of small, insignificant ones, but I was just letting my conscience stream into a river and come with all sorts of theories. I lay and lay awake. Luckily, I couldn't sleep really because two hotel workers, probably cleaners, sat in the room next to mine and talked and laughed loudly. I wouldn't be surprised if they'd been paid to do this, to really ensure I got no sleep. Not only were they hunting me, they wanted to mentally unseat me too. It was working. Towards the end of my 8 hours, I gave in and decided to book a flight back to Australia. All the fares I bought be damned. My safety was more important than wasted money, and the booked flights would act to put them off the scent. When my alarm went off, advising that my time was up in the room, I felt severe dread. Here I go, back to the dangerous world. I decided to go out to the smoking garden. It was risky, but I didn't give a fuck. A whole bunch of young'uns in airport uniforms were sitting down on their phones laughing. Have at it, fuckheads. I'm out of this country soon. Then something happened that was straight out of a movie. A bulking grey Asian male came rumbling along with his roly-poly. He didn't look at me, instead going into the shelter of the smoking garden. I stood on the outside of it as I didn't want to get trapped in there. Because he was big and tall, I surmised that he was maybe Chinese, not Asian. Two other Asian males were with him. One was as small as me and possibly Thai. The other nearly as big as the first and also possibly Chinese, but possibly they were just large Thai men. It's not unheard of. That's why they get into this game. The bikies were big males also. The little one stood right beside me. He defo looked at me. It was a mixture of shame, pity, and something else I couldn't read. I think he wanted to say something, but he didn't. The other one had his shirt front open and his big gut jutted forth. He was drinking a beer, I think, and swaying. All of a sudden, he dropped his drink on the ground. As he bent down to pick it up, the little one gave me a look like, see what we have to work with? This was definitely shame now. And these were definitely gangsters, failed ones. The scene was so heavy that I wondered if someone was for the chop, literally. Maybe the drunk one was going to be executed and his little mate was looking at me like, see, this is all your fault because I'd escaped. That's how they think. Or maybe they were just pissed that they didn't make Promise Bank and their asshole boss had revved them out. That's why he couldn't stand being near them. They could operate just like a straight company for all I knew. No executions, but they definitely would have blamed me either way. I didn't give in to pity or empathy myself. I just bent down, crushed out my cigarette on the curb and slowly walked away. As I neared the door, I deliberately opened the lid of a nearby trash can and threw the butt in. Thailand had been bad to me, but I wasn't going to stoop to littering the joint. Unlike these scumbags who were going to drop their butts on the ground once their durries burned down. This I knew. I did all these moves with such grace and dignity. Ella Fitzgerald came into my head. No, no, you can't take that away from me. I hadn't felt that badass since the Loy. It was 1 a.m. as I trudged around the semi-empty airport. There were still people about, a whole area that seemed to be filled with sleeping travellers. I was worried that they were US Trump crowd, or the cult, or Israelis, so I avoided it. I went to the departure boards and tried to find a flight to Singapore. Success. There was one early in the morning, a few hours away, and it was Air Asia, so I might be able to exchange flights. I'd use any means to escape and save money while I was at it. Two 30 plus Skippy males were nearby. They passed in front of me as I was staring up at the board. This time they eyed me. It wasn't friendly. Were they rapists who'd shown up for the foiled BKK event? They had a bad vibe, so I pinned them as such. I went to the AirAsia counter planning on buying the ticket first thing when they opened. They were open. Thank Goddess for Thailand's convenience, even though I did feel for workers who had to do overnight shifts at a flight desk. How did they stay awake? I couldn't get any flight swaps or refunds, unfortunately. I didn't care, as long as I got on the Singapore flight. Once that was sorted, I decided to sleep on the bench seats that were for AirAsia customers. This wasn't frowned upon. I saw two more 30 plus skip males spread out on the benches. I stood at the foot of one and eyed my way up his shorts to his inner thigh that had a little tattoo on it. It wasn't lust or admiration. I knew they were rapists also. I just wanted to feel some vengeance at being able to stare at him while he was asleep. I could kick the living fuck out of you right now, and despite you being way bigger than me, you'd drop like a sack of shit. It was a wonder my evil eye didn't wake him up. He was wearing a little silky eye mask that looked ridiculous on his big rugby playing head. He was in Canterbury shorts, so I made that rugby assumption. Oh, and the predilection for gang rape. That goes with the rugby playing territory too. In fact, all the male team sports were into it, and with lawyers to protect them. When I taught in the minimum security male prison, there was a very attractive Fijian male in there who was a bit spellbinding and proving to be a problem because I had a crush for me. I looked him up and he was in there for triple rape. Crush crushed. I also looked him up online and he'd been a pro rugby player. I bet my right arm that he'd gotten away with rape while he was employed. Once retired and with no corrupt lawyers to pay settlements or fight cases, he still had the addiction to rape and was now paying for it, thank fuck. He was going to be deported at the end of his sentence. Good. There was nothing else to do but board the plane this time and finally leave Don Muang. The departure lounge contained a few familiar faces. I spied the young four-eyed Thai male who tried to approach me yesterday. He wasn't flying to Singapore. There was another flight to somewhere that sounded Indonesian. So he was Indo and had specially flown out. What was the story? Did they win a spot in the rape line? Imagine that. It's almost worse than paying to be in it. I stared at him and searched his expression to see what his motivations were. He looked sheepish as hell and wouldn't hold my gaze. Guilty. So they know it's rape. Or maybe he didn't know at the time but found out later, hence trying to talk to me. I had to remember that they probably got cash for speaking to me. Or let's face it, crypto. Hopefully they were getting grifted on a pump and dump by the super dogs. Grifters gonna grift. I should have gone and tried to get some answers out of him. Pussios like that would call security on me. I was already safe from cops. I didn't need any negative attention. I can't remember much of the short flight to Singapore. There didn't seem to be anyone I had to fear. On arrival in Singapore, I felt more free. I love Changi Airport anyway, and I decided to go to the Jewel Shopping Centre and explore. There was an absolutely beautiful atrium and water feature in the middle of it. I took a little bench along a two-level ramp away from everyone, so I thought. It was a walkway, so there were a few people passing, but they all seemed intent on the water feature and taking a million pics of themselves and their family. I was simply enjoying the beauty that is Singaporean architecture, along with everyone else. Just a nobody tourist. Suddenly, two young, doll-like Singaporean girls positioned themselves facing each other on the two different levels of the ramp with cameras on. They counted as they stepped around the ramp bend. I realized as one of them turned her back to me that it was all about me. I didn't look, but I knew the pose too well. Pretend you're taking a selfie, or in this case, filming her friend. Get me in the background. These little twits video would have featured a hunched over broken woman sitting on a bench with bandana on her head and COVID mask on her face. They then stood over to the side and did that ridiculous pose they do with their fingers in the V sign up against their duck-lipped pout. When did this generation not realize that that's the sign for oral sex on a woman? I seriously doubted they were gay. The boldness of them and being dressed like sex dolls made me worried for them. Sure, they'd be chasing male likes online. That's all they live for. One day they'd make a mistake and they'd be at the mercy of some cold fucking animals who they'd mistake for boys who were innocently into them. There was no more of that. Since it's a sport, I thought of an analogy of how sport has been ruined because gambling is now involved. So too, this game. Courtship should never have been a sport in the first place, but now it had worse stakes than just getting sex out of a woman. A sport that's been tainted with gambling like cash rewards and so much other sick corruption. Even my preference for hookup culture wasn't as cold and greedy as this. I was nice to the boys who I picked. They were free gigolos after all. And I was sick as a dog. I was coughing horribly. A doctor had told me when I got a COVID vaccine update recently that whooping cough was on the rise. I bet that's what I had. My ribs hurt when I coughed. The night at the Loy had been colder than what I would have expected in Thailand, and getting no sleep is pretty hard on my older body. I just plowed through. Adrenaline is its own medicine. That's why people take pseudoephedrine. I swanned around the airport for a bit after that. An Indian curry and naan went down very well, followed by a delicious rose lassi. I found little sitting spots where I could curl up with my boots off. That's what I love about Changi. You can be a house cat and sleep where you like. I was near the door to the smoking area down a little alley near the taxi drop-off point. When it got dark, I went outside for my thousandth cigarette, and a male and a woman alighted from a taxi. The male looked familiar, but he was, yes, that's right, a white male in his 30s who looked like all the other males in their 30s. He could have easily been at the Loy, and I could have easily seen him there, but he didn't stick in my memory. He looked a bit shocked to see me walking out the sliding doors towards him. I turned when I saw him to head to the alley. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black guy follow them out of the taxi. I really wanted to turn and look back at the black guy in case he was good looking. The male hung back against the cab and I was too far past to look at him. If I turned all the way around and obviously gawked at him, I didn't want to be that complimentary to a male. They all thought I was some kind of super slut and I didn't want to give him any ammunition. I'm sure that that black male was Han and he was avoiding being recognized. Shoes on the other foot now, fuckhead. I let him pass by unnoticed this time. I should have wanted to run into him in the airport. I may have gotten some explanation. So you didn't get to rape me. Did you still get paid, you broke nigger piece of shit? I needed to disclaim that I'd never call anyone a nigger. But when they're a rapist, there's no respectful rules about insults. Obviously, I would have asked more charmingly. I doubt I would have gotten anything but dumb denial. Another part of me was extra depressed about this near encounter. Why did he get to travel with friends in normality, probably arriving at the airport at the latest time? There'd be no sleeping like a homeless person in airports for him. He told me during one of our discussions that he was off to Japan next. Oh, how lovely for him. Well, I was too terrified to go to Vietnam. This had ripped a bit of my guts out of me for some reason. I felt insecure, inadequate all of a sudden. Fuck them. I should have focused on the fact that these losers would have been disappointed that I'd outwitted Thai gangsters nearly every step of the way. Maybe they were in admiration of me. After all, they weren't political rapists like the Israelis. They were just basic rapey rapists who could probably change their opinion on a victim if they were convinced in their lizard brains that she was badass. I didn't want their respect and admiration. It would just be funny for the superdogs if tides turned against them and in my favour. My flight to Sydney was just after midnight. I booked it online this time while I was in the sleeping rooms at Don Muang. I didn't care anymore about being tracked. They obviously could find me, whatever I did. The departure area of Changi is a good time, and I was relieved when I could finally go in. I made my way up to the beds. These were couches that had a slope to them, heads slightly inclined and the knee area slightly raised too to make the sleeping very comfy. I kept my bag wrapped around my shoulders and on my stomach, with the backpack on the ground very close to my head. If someone started to move it, I hoped I'd wake up. Thieving was the last thing on my mind. Planting drugs on me was the first. Again, my best sleep in public. At the AirAsia benches in Don Muang, I'd woken up to a busy cluster of people and some hijab-clad women all standing over me, looking at me. They needed the seats and I'd quickly leapt up. They were on my flight to Singapore because I noticed one of them in the toilets when I'd alighted at Changi. She was young and dressed semi-traditionally, covered from face to feet, but she had on jeans. She was a big girl, and I smiled at her as she watched me. Too bad if she was tracking me. I felt like she needed a smile. It worked. She started to sing and admire herself in the mirror. This was similar to the cult girls. Was I awakening sexuality in these young women? I felt bad about laughing at those others now. I should have shown encouragement. I fully checked out all my luggage when I woke up, even checking the padded shoulder straps to see if someone had cut a little slit to slide something in them. They had to get out of bed early to get to me now. I made my way to my departure gate to do some more house cat lying around on any bit of floor I could find. Finally, we were being led into the closed-off departure lounge that had its own x-ray. They didn't fuck around at Changi, 2 security points. When it was time to line up for the plane, there were 2 males behind me. Yep, you guessed it, some more bullshit. They were dressed like undercover cops, sporty shirts, shorts and trainers, but not the gangster kind. And they fully had that vibe. I'm sure they weren't, though. They both looked at me like the Loy gangsters had, like I wasn't a person, but they were standing as close to me as they could. I made a very obvious move of putting my backpack to the front of my body to let them know that I was sus on them planting drugs. Their huge frames were designed to unsettle me. I laughed at them instead. So they talked among themselves. They were Aussies. What would these fuckheads do to me? Follow me back to Wirra? I didn't think twice about them anymore. I wouldn't show fear. I was over it. On the plane, I was flanked by 2 Thai males. I didn't really notice them at first. I was just so tired. They slept most of the time anyway, until they didn't. I took out my phone towards the end of the 9-hour flight and noticed that there was a white paste smeared on the bottom of the phone that had made its way into the speaker holes. Holy fuck. I'd been snoozing and this made me very, very awake. Luckily, I didn't try to wipe it off as it would have gotten on me. I got up to rush to the toilet. Once in there, despite my terrible shakes, I managed to clean it off with paper and water. There were still traces in the holes. I didn't know what to do, but I just let it go. Surely a dog wouldn't pick up those microscopic holes. How fucking clever was whoever had done this to know that I wouldn't be able to remove it completely. Luckily, it didn't panic me. It should have, but I was satisfied with the job I'd done with cleaning it. When I got back, that's when I started to realise the 2 Thai guys weren't that innocent. They sure didn't look the kind of guys who'd get visas into Australia. One other thing I noticed and didn't join the dots on till later. The male to my left had the same water bottle as me, the weird brand that I'd picked up at a cafe in Don Muang. Coincidence? Again, I gave it not much thought. I was nearly home. I had so much to work out at the home I lived at. It probably wasn't a home, more a trap. I'd considered telling Billy all about what happened. This wouldn't be to get her empathy or help. This would be to see the tells that she dropped. I needed to get some concrete evidence of her involvement, then work out what I'd do from there. I considered that I really needed a friend. I thought of my mate Adrian, who lived in Sydney and who I'd visited before. He'd be a good non-judgmental person that I could offload to. After all, he'd offloaded to me after getting too wrapped up in an ex-boyfriend and doing some time in a mental health unit. It'd be good to see Adrian, even though last time was hectic with him fighting with said boyfriend. I hoped to goddess that he was now an ex. I couldn't take the fighting, but I was desperate for friends. I walked through the airport not seeing either the two Thai males or the two bullish Aussie thugs. I was on their radar. I'd had a sip from the last of my water bottle and dropped it in a bin. As I neared the goods to declare, nothing to declare gates, something in me said, go to the goods to declare. On the arrival card, I'd read that I wasn't allowed to take in more than 100 grams of tobacco. I was sure I had more than that. I couldn't afford to get busted for anything. I told the checkpoint customs guy about my tobacco predicament. We're not looking for tobacco. Don't worry about it this time. Off you go. This wasn't the first time I'd done this, though I had done it quite innocently this time. Once I came in from Thailand with a whole lot of stock valued at over $1,000 that should have invoked a customs duty. I told the woman at the checkpoint that I was carrying 2 pouches of tobacco. There was a sign at the goods to declare point that stated the TV show Border Patrol was filming that day and to tell someone if you didn't want to be filmed. The woman led me over to a spot behind some columns. She half whispered the same message that this male customs guy had said to me. We're not going to worry about that today. You're free to go. Enjoy your stay. Fuck yeah, I was so over the moon. She'd protected me from getting my mug on the telly too. It was when tobacco had started to really spike in price, so I'd saved some good cash on the duty-free pouches. I guess when I went through goods to declare, I knew they wouldn't search me. Still, it was a risk, particularly when I'd only been out of the country for something like 5 days. I looked like a smuggler. I decided to find the smoking spot to celebrate this tricky move. I had absolutely no idea how tricky that had been. There was a couple behind me. I heard her say to him, look, there's smoking over there. They followed me to the smoking area. Without turning around, I would have been able to accurately predict that they were Aussie Lebs or other Arabs in their late 20s, early 30s. He seemed to want to talk to me. She gave me a smug, condescending look, like the Israeli bitch from the Loy. Okay, here we go again with this bullshit. I wanted to get up into a Western Sydney face and shout, what have you got against me, bitch? I stood up for Palestine online and it nearly got me killed. What in the Middle Eastern hypocritical fuck have they told you about me to make you want to kill me too? Or are you just a couple of broke cunts? Luckily I didn't, because what I heard next made me realise that he was 100% genuine gangster. We'd had a discussion about whooping cough. He and I both had it. I said that it was because people weren't vaccinating their kids against it anymore, and that was bad because it kills people. I clarified that it can kill babies who catch it. He agreed wholeheartedly with me, was even friendly. Then he got on the phone, right in front of me. I don't know if they think I'm deaf, dumb and blind, or if they want me to hear. Personally, I loved it because it gave me not only evidence but stories to tell you, dear reader, about the kinds of ignoramuses I have tailing me. Conversation went as follows. We fucked up. We had the cop there and everything. At least he had the smarts to switch to Arabic after that. We all looked at each other after the phone call was over, like we were all on adrenaline shots. I took off without saying goodbye. I begged a taxi driver to take me to the long-term car park. He insisted that I take the shuttle bus. I offered him $70 cash and that seemed to change things. As I sat in the taxi, it all came to me. The drugs wiped onto my phone were indeed drugs. The water bottle that the Thai next to me also had was swapped out for mine. I'd then drunk from it and it would have contained yaba or something amphetamine. This is why I was extraordinarily hyped beyond my usual adrenaline from being hunted. I was meant to go through nothing to declare. The dogs would have sniffed the drugs on my phone. They would have taken a blood test of me and found the drugs in my system. I wouldn't have been done for smuggling, but they then would have handed me over to the bent copper that the sand bandits had organised. He'd then hand me over to said sand bandits. So I was going to get raped and live streamed by this chick's boyfriend and his gangster mates, which is why she looked at me with such venom. It's not me, sweetheart, it's the company you keep. By going through goods to declare, I threw a curveball at them. Man, I'd love to go back and find the Italian customs officer who let me through. I'd bend down and kiss his wedding ring like he was the Pope. I was so close to being caught, so fucking close. I'd done this expensive ride before when I departed the country, what felt like a month ago but was only last week. I thought I'd forgotten something. So I got a cab ride to and fro from the airport to the car park and back only to find I had it in my luggage the whole time. And I had to deal with the same curry cell nonsense both ways. The first cabbie on my day of departure posed the question, how do you know someone isn't going to come along and steal your van? I replied, buddy, if you're thinking of stealing my van, you'll have to pay for the gate, unless you bust through the boom gate. Then you'll be on some kind of camera. I'd say there's some nighttime security. The fuckhead was begging me to stop suggesting that he would steal my van. I didn't want to. I was going to keep rubbing his ignorance into himself. He knew all that I was telling him. He was just trying to scare a woman. This next curry cell, when he pulled up to my van, I'd asked him to stick around to ensure the battery wasn't dead, was openly and stupidly underestimating me. What? This van? Yes, fuckwit. I know that you probably can't drive one, but that doesn't mean I can't. They're so narrow in their views on women. No wonder they hate us. Their ideas are so limited that someone like me is like an alien that they don't dare understand. This was by the by, and I should have been relieved, really. This male wasn't looking me up on his phone, wasn't copping some cash prize for being near me. I'll bet he'd kick himself afterwards when he found out he could have made more money off me. This kind of male would have delivered me straight to gangsters, his job be damned. I get it, they have to support their whole family. But I didn't have a family, so I get to live better than everyone who did. Don't blame me, I don't make the nuclear family rules. I texted Adrian and asked if I could come visit. He was fairly quick to reply and I was so grateful. Yay, a friend at last. A friend who's not a drunken frog who, moments before he decided to be friends, was going to rape me. I've been pretty low in my life, but I've never had to settle on that for a friendship. The trip over to Botany was uneventful, thank goddess. At one stage, my anger boiled up when I saw a young male in his fancy fighter car, so I decided to cut him off safely with enough room for him to let me in. I just knew he was an enemy. He had his girl in the car, but he still would be the type to look up IBA footage to track me along with all the others. He acted predictably, roaring around me as soon as he could and taking off going over the speed limit. Yeah, fucking hero. They're so easily led into dangerous shit. That's why so many die young. If it's not that, it's bullying in the workplace and they top themselves. Apparently, trade apprentices are among the highest rates of suicide. They're not being bullied by women in the workplace, that's for sure. I should have sympathy, but I just don't. Every death is one less. Arriving at Adrian's, I started to realise who my other enemies were. Adrian always lived with a stack of Colombians. His ex-boyfriend is Colombian, so he'd worked his way into the community. There was a couple talking to each other outside the apartment complex. Adrian was off to the side, watering his succulents. The male was saying to the woman while pointing at me, "She's staying with us. Can you imagine?" How the fuck did he know that I was who I was? This gave me probably the biggest drop I'd had beyond learning I was going to die. This is Joe Public, here in my own country, knowing who I was. They weren't incel porn tragics, generic Skip Grommets or Western Sydney gangsters. Demographics of people who had to be careful of the law. They'd obviously been following this whole thing. Maybe Adrian had told them. They both said hello like nothing was out of the ordinary. And Adrian greeted me like there was nothing amiss. He was talking to yet another little Colombian male who vanished as soon as I approached Adrian. I caught a hug and it was good. And as we were walking up the stairs, I expressed my concern. "I don't think your flatmates want me staying here." We went upstairs and I went and smoked a durry on his massive, beautiful plant-filled patio. Through a window on the patio, I spied the Colombian flatmate who'd been talking to Adrian moments before. I moved away so I didn't appear to be looking in on him. The whole time I stayed at Adrian's, he never came out of his room. He'd be making bank sitting this close to me, though. I didn't put it together like that at the time. Same with the flatmates outside. Adrian had explained their behaviour away, so it made sense and allayed my suspicions. But it didn't. I just didn't feel like dealing with it. When I did eventually get down to squeezing out the whole story to Adrian, the sheer effort of it really exhausted me. I was not only telling a horrible story, I was fighting to be considered sane. I don't know what I expected. Adrian has pretty bad ADHD, and I'm sure he has several personality disorders which make him a tad selfish. He seemed pretty bored in parts, even though it's a wild fucking ride from 5 days ago to now. I told him my suspicions about Billy. Maybe people are just weird. Maybe there's nothing there. Why stick up for Billy? I figured that he couldn't process the horror of it if this was real. He did say, when I told him about the Singapore incel, that would have been terrifying. I would have turned around and gone home. He was right, of course. The problem was, I wasn't scared of this little grommet and his mate. I suggested we go down to the park for a walk. I needed to get out of the house. This little trip really cemented the fact that I was indeed the target in a human Pokemon game. I saw a Gen X male across the park staring at us and walking towards us, but pulling up enough of a distance away. Another male, Boomer this time, walked his dog past us on the footpath. He too was staring with a look of delight on his face. I even called out hello and he helloed back. You don't do this in Sydney. It's not that friendly in middle-class suburbs like this. As we were sitting on the bench, Adrian fiddled with his phone for a couple of seconds. He explained himself. That was just a notification to say my iPad is back in the flat. Okay, but why explain it? I guess he could tell that I was paranoid and on edge. I suggested we go. Maybe subconsciously I suspected that my location had been made by my only friend in all this. We stood on the corner to cross the road, some meters away from the park bench. A ute went by with two young males in it. One of them didn't even look at us standing on the corner. Instead, his gaze went straight to the park bench where there was no one. This gave my subconscious the proof it had suspected. And apart from terrifying, it was interesting how he didn't look straight at us. The last position that was shared was obviously what they were working with. So I wasn't tracked at every move like a moving target. It was a series of positions shared, like when you share your location in maps. This would have been exactly what it was. Perhaps my phone had nothing to do with it, or my body. People just shared the pin and others looked for it, or me. Simpler and less technologically advanced than I thought. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't accuse Adrian. He'd happily lie to protect himself and keep playing the game for money. He'd once been high up in a public service media position. He'd lost that by doing some shady shit that he'd never fully admitted to me. He was now living above his means and would have been desperate for cash. I understood. What I didn't understand was how he could lie so easily and be so friendly to my face. He even put his arm around me as we walked from the park, hugged by Judas. It was all I had. I'd just been telling him about the drug rape that had happened in North Queensland at the hands of those pub owners all those years ago. That's where I first became mates with Adrian. We worked in a federal MP's office together. Mate, I don't know how you keep going. It's all a bit much to deal with. It sounded like he wondered why I don't do myself in. I think I had included that bit while yarning with him in the flat, the duality of being able to be a friend while exploiting a friend for money. It's all pretty fucked up, and yes, Adrian, I don't know how I keep on going either. I think I went out of my body and just survived objectively while under Adrian's care. We ate dinner, I showered, and then toddled off to bed. I was going to sleep in my van to see if people would crowd around. If they did, I could easily ring Adrian for help. It was kind of unnecessary because I already knew my answer about the tracking by Joe Public. It was a risky move, really, and would Adrian have protected me? As I turned the corner on the street where my van was parked, I saw a curry cell heading right towards me. He was on his phone loudspeaker and holding it in front of his face, laughing. I headed right at him, not wanting to step off the footpath for him. At the last minute, he stepped aside and apologised. You have more than just this to apologise about, you little fuck. At least he knew that I wasn't to be messed with. I wondered if they gave reports in the comments of what I was like. Tell them I'm a bitch. There was a roundabout very close to my van, so the fighter cars that drove past intermittently had to slow down. I couldn't work out if they were slowing down for the signal coming out of my van. They also seemed to stop at about 11 p.m, so I wasn't being tracked. If the game was on, those little fuckheads would have driven past all night. Maybe they all gathered outside on foot and me inside in my cozy little bed was unaware. I was really glad to get a decent night's sleep either way. I sure needed it. I lived another day despite a situation that I was convinced I was the only person on the whole globe going through.